So next on our list is to hook up our register method in our Angular app to our API so we can actually register a new user. So let's head back to VS Code. And we want to open up our Auth Service.ts file. This is where we'll start from, and we've already got a login method inside here, and we're going to create a register method in addition to this. Now, the register method is going to be a little bit more simple than our login method because we're not getting anything back from the server that we need to use in our component or do anything with. In our login method, we needed to store the token, but when we register, we don't need to do that. So let's create a new method called register. And this is going to take a model of type any. And model is just an object that's going to store the username and password that we pass through to this. And in this case, what we're going to do is return list.http.post, and then we're going to say list.baseURL plus, then register, then a comma, and we'll pass in the model into this method. Ta-da! That's our register method. It's as simple as that. Now we're still going to return an observable from this method. And if I hover over the post method and sort of scroll down, we can see that it's going to return an observable. So in order to use this method, we're still going to need to subscribe to it inside our component. So let's head over to our register component to do this. And we need to bring in our auth service so we can make use of that method that we've just created. So we'll say private auth service and auth service to bring this in. And let's just make sure it's imported at the top, and it is. And we'll take out our console.log method and we'll say list.authService.register. We'll pass it this.model. Then we'll subscribe, and for the success, which will be the next method, I'll just use empty parentheses this time because we're not actually using anything from this response inside what we're doing after this is successful. And all we do at the moment is we'll just say console log and registration successful. And we'll also handle the error. So we'll say error, and we'll say console.log. And in this case, we'll just pass in the error. And this will be the HTTP response we get back from the server that's contained inside here. So that's all we need to do actually to hook up our register method. Pretty straightforward. Let's go back to the browser and make sure it actually works. So let's just make sure that we can register a user. And I'll just add a new user. I'll just call him Simon, and password of password. And I'll just open up the console just so I can see what's happening. And I'll click on the register button and I'll get a registration successful. If I go to my database and take a look inside here and just refresh the database, I can see I've got a new user that's been added called Simon. So this has all worked successfully. And just as a quick demo, I just want to show you what happens if I send up a bad request. For instance, if I try and register another user called Simon, and I'll click register and I get a 400 bad request. That's fine. That's really what we'd expect. And the reason for the error is kind of buried inside our HTTP error response. And we can see the error is username already exists. So that's fine. What happens if I send up a different kind of problem? And I'll just change the username and I'll just send in a password that's too short for our API, because remember we set this to be a minimum of 4 characters and a maximum of 8. Let's try and register again with a too short a password and a different username. And again, we get our 400 bad requests, and that's good. That's what we're expecting. And inside here, we can see that our error is contained in our error as part of an array this time, because it's a slightly different kind of error. It's a model state error. And it tells us we must specify a password between 4 and 8 characters. Now, in the next section, we're going to deal with error handling a bit better than we're doing now, because we don't want to hide problems from our user inside the console. And also, we'd like to prevent the request even going up to the server in the event that the password is too short, for instance. We can't do much about the username check because we have to compare the username the user has entered with what's stored in our database, but there are other types of validation errors that we can prevent even going up to the server. And we'll deal with that a little bit later on. In the next section, we want to take a look at error handling. So just to finish up, I just want to clean up a few bits and bobs that we're not using anymore or won't be using going forward, and certainly we don't need these values being populated inside our sign-up form. So we'll just go back to VS Code and clean these up. And we want to head over to our home component, to the HTML, and actually we want to head to our home component class, and we want to remove this getValues method, and also the getValues inside our ng-oninit, and we'll clean up this values. We'll not be using this anymore. And we'll go to our register component form, and I'll just remove this form group that we added just to demonstrate the input properties. So I'll clean up this as well. And actually inside our home component, we want to remove these values from home. As we've just removed that from our home component, and just take a quick review to make sure I haven't missed anything. And inside our register component, we'll also remove this input property, and that's fine. That's all we need to remove. And everything else we're going to keep going forwards because we need it for our application. Also, because we're at the end of this particular section, let's go into our source control and we'll stage these changes, and we'll give it a commit message of end of section 4, and command or control and enter to commit those, and I'll just push them up to the GitHub repo. And next up we'll take a look at a summary of what we've done in this section.